Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon to everyone. I think I have been assigned the task of being the moderator. So on behalf of the Pakistan Center for Philanthropy, I would like to welcome you all to the webinar on Doing Good Index 2020, a comprehensive study conducted to gain a wider understanding of the factors that enable or hinder private social investment across South Asia. This is the gist. This study is the result of the joint collaboration and partnership among three well-established institutions working in the field of philanthropy, which are the Center for Asian Philanthropy and Society, known as CAPS, based in Hong Kong, Pakistan Center for Philanthropy from Islamabad, also known as PCP, and Sustainable Development Policy Institute called SDPI from Islamabad. This webinar aims to present and discuss the findings of the study of 18 Asian economies, including Pakistan, to assess how best to build a vibrant social sector in the region to achieve better social outcomes in post-COVID-19 situation. Despite the fact that Asian region has huge financial and human resources, yet it lags in social sector development, showing millions of people living in poor conditions with lack of access to education, health, and basic sanitation, as well as many countries are faced with the issues of socio-political conflicts and all, which also affects, the giving and other sort of flows, capital flows in many ways. I'll be brief and crisp so that we don't based on the data collected from over 2,000 social delivery organizations and interviews of various experts in the field, the analysis in the study provides a roadmap for governments, private and corporate donors to work together to cope with the economic challenges caused by the ongoing pandemic and keep pace with the growing needs of people. In this context, the social sector needs to be supported by funding from businesses and private individuals in the provision of vital social services. The analysis in the study also helps to understand what policies and practices can best increase philanthropic giving in these countries. In Pakistan's context, it is observed that the declines in funding for the social sector continues, particularly from foreign donors, posing a formidable challenge during the pandemic. Like other countries in the region, we are committed to achieving sustainable development goals, requiring a substantial role to be played by the social sector. In this regard, government's involvement is crucial to harness the potential philanthropic giving for supporting social sector growth. The Doing Good Index has assessed the factors and indicators across 4 areas to map out the environment and preconditions for enhancing social investment in each country, which will be, of course, discussed and presented by the members from the CAP. I will not go into that detail, but it is, but then it has also divided those countries into 4 distinct categories. And it is encouraging to note that Pakistan has moved up from doing okay in the previous year to the category of doing better in the current analysis. However, there is still a large room for further improvement in this regard. I think with these background remarks, I would now like to start the session with welcome remarks by Ms. Shazia Amjad, Executive Director, PCP. Next will be a presentation on Doing Good Index by Dr. Ruth A. Shapiro, co-founder and CEO of CPS, and Ms. Mahwish Mumtaz Ahmed, Director of Research, CAPS. This will be followed by a panel discussion on the subject. Our distinguished panelists are Dr. Atiya Inayatullah, co-founder and member Board of Directors, PCP, and also currently the chairperson of the PCP Research Committee. She is a well-known scholar and ex-parliamentarian and also a former federal minister in the cabinet, Pakistan's cabinet. Our second panelist is Mr. Farhan Bukhari, whom you just got introduced to. He's a renowned journalist and a well-known scholar and currently he's a Pakistan respondent in the Financial Times, UK. In the end, Ms. Shazia Amjad, ED-PCP, will wrap up and give her closing remarks. I think please note that the time for this session is quite limited. And I think to manage the time, we have to be, the speakers, they're requested to follow the time limit or stay in their limits so that we can complete the discussion and the presentation. With this, I will call out the name for each speaker when the session starts. So first, now I request Ms. Shazia Amjad to give her welcome and opening remarks.
Thank you.
And you have 5 minutes to.
Thank you, Dr. Nausheen. I think a very good introduction to not only the DGI index, but also to our board members. I think before I comment on the report, and I think for majority of the part, I leave it to Ruth and Mavish to give the audiences that we have online an overview of what the report is all about. But here I would like to take this opportunity and speak a little bit about the center and the work that we do. Pakistan Center for Philanthropy was formed, the idea came up in 1998 when Afghan Development Network issued a report telling that Pakistanis are a generous nation and they give 70 billion PKR annually. And one of the recommendations of that report was that there should be a center which should report on philanthropy and work towards improving the effectiveness and transparency of the sector. And hence, with these recommendations of the report, the center was formed. It finally started working in the year 2000. And the first executive director was Shehnaz Wazir Ali Saiba. She's an eminent scholar and a parliamentarian and a federal minister. I think she really put life into it, and she took it and pegged it with the government's revenue system also, like is the case in many of the other countries where such centers are working. I've seen it in Philippines, the PCNC. I've seen it in UK. I've seen it in US, where certification is linked to the tax benefits that accrue to the organizations. In a similar way, PCP certification leads to availing tax benefits within Pakistan. And to date, PCP has certified more than 2,000 plus NPOs in Pakistan and evaluated many more. Our portfolio recently under the new regulatory regime has enhanced quite a bit. And our certification now involves looking at INGOs. We also look at universities, which under the new regulations have to be working under a not-for-profit organization, and many of the private sector universities are currently working like that. And we are now, we also assess and evaluate the local organizations, that is the local support organizations or the third-tier organizations in Pakistan. So in this way, gradually over the past 2 decades, PCP has really grown, and its certification is certainly valued and is held in very high esteem. More and more in the recent past, we have seen government reliance increasing on our certification. And I think another very valuable service that the center is doing is that we are the only center in Pakistan that publish research on philanthropy. We look at the numbers, we look at the trends, not only within the country, but outside the country. We look at cross-border financing trends, and we do corporate sector analysis also. And hence we contribute to the academia and the research discourse in the domain of philanthropy by reporting on philanthropy and its trends and its issues and challenges from Pakistan. And I think this is really really puts us as a unique and a very a different sort of an organization within Pakistan. Strategically speaking, center in the future looks towards enhancing the volume of philanthropy, and the Pakistani philanthropy making it more effective, especially both the individual and organizational donations, so that, and we try and fill in the trust gap, the trust deficit, which I think even the DGI report has pointed out exists in all Asian countries. And the purpose of this transparency, credibility, and trust is to build and to improve incentives for the corporate sector and for the private donors to give their donations and their resources and pitch them very strategically into philanthropy, which I think in countries like Pakistan, and with respect to the social development sectors, contributes immensely. And I think I would not be wrong to say that Pakistan's health and education sector are the largest recipient of this philanthropic investments. And if and without these, I think both the public and the private sector would not be able to really meet the gap of reaching out to marginalized communities with regards to health. And in COVID times recently, this became really evident. The funds and the resources and the personnel were mobilized at lightning speed. Usually public sector is heavyweight and takes time. The agility of the civil society and the agility of the philanthropy funds and their flexibility made it possible to reach out to the most vulnerable in the most crucial of times. And so is the case for education, where philanthropy is filling the gap left by both the private and the public sector. I think the center sees itself as a strategic partner of the civil society organization. We are a convener, we are a voice for them, but we also lend a transparency lens to them. And we hope to improve this work further, and not only work in tandem with the civil society in Pakistan, but also with the various stakeholders, the donors and the government. And I see this role even getting stronger and even getting more prominent in the coming days. So I think, Dr. Nausheen, I must have met my time.
I think,
so
thank you so much.
I hand it over back to you. And,
well managed time. Thank you.
And I welcome the honorable participants and our colleagues from Hong Kong. And I hope we have a good discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, oh, we have Dr. Atiya Inayatullah on screen. Welcome aboard, Dr. Atiya Inayatullah. And we are glad that you have been able to, resolve the issue. And I think, is your mic on? You should join the audience.
Let me check it. I'll just check.
Okay, so I think Dr. Atiya Inayatullah needs no introduction, but still I would say her contributions to PCP as well as to many other organizations are commendable. She's an icon in Pakistan, representing women's issues, now in the philanthropy sector, the research program of the center. So she's our mentor, our colleague, and I don't have really words to say in how can I describe, but I think you already know Dr. Ruth Shapiru and Mavish Mumtaz Khan, who are representing Dr. Ruth Shapiru. She's the co-founder and the CEO of CAPS, and Mavish Hayat, she's the director of research. So something common amongst us at CAPS. And she has a great experience of working on innovative projects like Doing Good Index and others. And so is Dr. Ruth Shapiro. So if you want to add anything to what I have said, please go ahead, and then we continue with the session. Mic on kare.
Can you hear me now?
Ji, we can hear you now.
Oh, great. I'm on board.
Dr. Atiya, we just finished the, I just gave the background and the agenda for today's session. And Ms. Shazia Amjad, she gave her opening remarks and welcome remarks for the session. Now we are going to go next on the two presentations by Dr. Ruth and Mavish Mumtaz Ahmed on Doing Good Index. So they will, I think, basically what I'm expecting is they will highlight or shed light or throw light on the salient features, the process of this study, and the salient findings and its relevance to, especially particularly to Pakistan's situation under the COVID-19 situation. Please, Dr. Ruth Shapiro, please go ahead. You have 10 minutes and so has Mahfaz, she has 10 extra. So you have 20 minutes in all to make your presentation or your views.
Okay.
You have 13 minutes, sorry, 30 minutes.
I was going to say, Dr. Nasheen, only because you command so much authority, you cut our minutes by 1/3, but I'm glad you gave them back. So thank you. I'm Ruth Shapiro, the co-founder and CEO of CAPS in Hong Kong, and my colleague Mahfaz Mumtaz Ahmed is our director of research. I really want to thank PCP for putting this event together, and how much we welcome and appreciate the partnership of PCP and Shazia Amjad. And then I also just really want to thank the other panelists and Dr. Nasheen, Dr. Atia, and Mr. Farhan for joining us this afternoon and commenting on our work after our presentation. And for all of those people out there in Facebook land, I really want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. So let me get right to it. First, I want to say that CAPS we are based in Hong Kong, but we work throughout Asia in 16 countries and plus Hong Kong and Taiwan. And we do 3 kinds of research: policy research, applied research, and bespoke or commissioned research. Our research has some features that are important. One is that we really try, to the extent possible, of understanding issues and strategies and models from the perspective of what works on the ground in Asia, in South Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia. We want to know, we believe that there are different models and strategies, cultural and historical contexts at play, and we want to understand what are the most effective models and strategies from this part of the world. And so CAPS was created to really document those models and strategies and give rise and shine a light on what are best practices that come from Asia. So that's the background. Now let me just go into the Doing Good Index. I'm trying to move the slide. Okay. I don't know if anyone's realized this, but we're facing a global pandemic. And it is upending many of the progress that the world has made in recent years. Our observation is that COVID-19 has not really introduced any new challenges or new trends, but it has greatly accelerated those that we saw in place. It has accelerated issues around equity. It has accelerated the use of technology. It has accelerated our ability or inability to work together. And for the social sector in Asia, it's accelerated the decrease in foreign funding coming into all of Asian economies because of the nature of a global pandemic. There's a sense that everyone needs to take care of their own. And so international funds have greatly diminished. Having said all that, it is the social sector that has stepped up. And we know that there are many examples in Pakistan of nonprofits, social enterprises, philanthropists, and CSR that have stepped in to work with government to provide food, to provide shelter, to provide health care, to provide masks and personal equipment to deal with this crisis, at the same time of doing the work that they were doing prior to COVID-19. So all of these organizations are multitasking, doing the work that they were in business to do, plus dealing with this catastrophic pandemic that is really affecting the health and economic well-being of the people and the communities around the world. Why did we do the Doing Good Index? As Shazia mentioned, there is in Asia a really significant, profound trust deficit. And when CAPS was first created, we went around and we asked a lot of wealthy people, why don't you give more locally? And it was interesting that whether those philanthropists were in Pakistan, Korea, China, the Philippines, the number one answer, the answer across the board was, we don't trust the system to receive our money. And we realized that we have a system problem that we need to address. And the way that people have been addressing it so far has been to essentially validate or do due diligence one organization at a time. And while that's good, we'll spend a lot of time doing that due diligence. So we need some systems to increase accountability, increase transparency, and build trust. And that's why we put together the Doing Good Index. We know that in the United States, it's generally accepted that philanthropy is equivalent to 2% of the GDP of that country. If 2% of the GDP of the 18 economies that's included in the Doing Good Index were to be unleashed, it would equal $587 billion a year. That is 12 times the amount of foreign aid flowing into Asia and 1/3 of the annual costs of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. It's a game changer. And there's really no reason that any Asian country can't get to 2%. So the Doing Good Index provides some tools and strategies to help us get there. How? The index, and Mevesh is going to get into the details of this, shows us how we can align incentives around doing good, gives us tools and strategies to mitigate the trust deficit, build accountability and transparency, and gives us tools to maximize private investment that flows into the sector. As Shazia mentioned, the Doing Good Index was an incredibly robust study. This was the second iteration. The inaugural iteration came out in 2018. This was 2020. Covers 18 economies. We surveyed 2,189 SDOs. Those are social delivery organizations, which are nonprofits and social enterprises. And with our partners, interviewed 145 experts and did 18 economy profiles. The index is on our website. Actually, let me hold up a beautiful hard copy.
But only from the front.
Only from the front.
We don't want you to see how thick it is.
Yes, it's quite a tome. But it's all available on our website at no charge. And there is a microsite also associated with it so that you can compare countries, compare statistics, play around with the data. And we really encourage everyone to go to our website and use all this work, all these findings, all this data in ways that are helpful to you. The index is made up of 4 sets of indicators, 3 of which have to do with government policies. Regulations, which really help to tell the story of how efficient the sector is regulated. There are regulations about how the money can or cannot flow, regulations to add accountability and communicate the ways that the government wants you to engage. Tax and fiscal policies is really about money. What are the incentives for donors? What are the incentives for recipients? And it also speaks to government's commitment or lack thereof to the sector and the signaling that they provide toward that commitment. And Mevesh will discuss that in greater detail. The last of the government is procurement. We believe that government, when it procures services from social delivery organizations, sends a powerful signal that legitimates these organizations, while at the same time helping them have a sustainable income stream, provided the government pays its bills, which is a provision that one needs to consider. But anyway, and the last one is ecosystem, which is really about how the society embraces charity, philanthropy, CSR, nonprofits, and other types of social delivery organizations. Do people trust them? Do they engage with them? How easy is it for them to hire people? So how important is this sector to the society? So this is the index itself. And as Shazia mentioned, Pakistan moved up this year. And that is really very heartwarming and very good news. I can tell you that we do these webinars often with country partners. We've been asked to talk to a number of other governments, and there is a great deal of interest in what PCP does to legitimate the sector, to accredit the organizations working in it. And PCP and the Philippines, I mean, the Pakistan and the Philippines are the only two that have such organizations, but they're not that won't be true for long, because there's so much interest in these kind of mechanisms. So having said that, let me turn this over to my colleague Mevesh, who will take you through the specifics about Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shapiro, for giving us a very candid review of the findings of the study. I think they are very useful and quite highly relevant to what, in fact, PCP does at the moment and what the country would be interested to look at in the current post-COVID situation.
Well, that's why we're such
now
a
I
good
request
team.
Mehwish to please go ahead and give her views or discuss
Thank
the
you very much.
situation.
Thank you very much.
If I may ask, will we be asking questions at the end, or can we just interject?
I think questions are always fantastic, but maybe if you let me just run through the rest of the presentation, I'll try to be quick and efficient. Then it would be great to engage in dialogue afterwards.
Sure.
But if you feel that it's a very compelling question, absolutely. Feel free to interrupt.
No, let's save it till the
Especially if
end.
you're going to pay us a compliment, Shazia, then definitely feel free to interrupt.
Yeah. My compliments to the Hong Kong team. I think you guys have really done in these constraining times a good job. And it looks good on the presentation as well. But I'll hold my very pertinent question for the end.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. And Assalamu alaikum to everyone who is watching. Ruth just gave you an overview of what the Doing Good Index is and why it is important and relevant today. And I want to walk you through some of the specifics and help explain why Pakistan is where it is, but also how it can improve. We know that in the last few decades, the social sector has really boomed in Pakistan. But at the same time, we know that the regulatory and tax regimes have sometimes been fragmented, and that has made the operations and setting up of nonprofits harder sometimes and easier at other times. And at the same time, as Ruth mentioned, there are some very strong headwinds blowing right now, such as the decline in foreign funding in Pakistan that has been amplified by increased scrutiny of foreign funding, and I'll speak to that in a little bit more detail, plus then COVID, in which we're all in it together, but all of this means that fewer resources are going towards the social sector. So let's discuss and think how Pakistan can help unleash more domestic resources for social investment that can help support both nonprofits and the rising tide of social enterprises in Pakistan. And the Doing Good Index does exactly that. It shows us how domestic philanthropy, domestic CSR, and domestic impact investment can be amplified and unleashed. And in Pakistan, we see three main areas where improvements can be made. One is in improving regulations that can help with both a more efficient social sector as well as a more transparent and therefore more trustworthy social sector. As Ruth said, the trust deficit is a massive problem, not just in Pakistan, but across the region. The second area is that there is room for better incentives for giving that will encourage more Pakistani individuals, philanthropists, business leaders, and corporates to give more. And this is where taxes can play a role. So that's the second area. And the third area is that there is room, in fact, an imperative almost, for greater collaboration between the government and the social sector and the corporate and the social sectors. And we'll walk you through all of these. So let's start with the first one, which is, what does the regulatory regime and the regulatory environment for the social sector look like in Pakistan? And we see that it's a bit of a mixed bag, with some very positive developments and then some not so positive developments. One of the great things is that in Pakistan, it does seem to be relatively quick and efficient to set up a nonprofit. It takes about 2 months, whereas the Asian average is about 3 months. And this is not something to be proud of, but in Hong Kong, it's actually a year. It takes a year to get tax exempt status. So Pakistan does reasonably well there. And typically a nonprofit requires only one clearance to set up. And here Pakistan is in a small group of 6 economies only across the 18 that we study, that where the administrative burden of setting up is so low. So that's some great news. But at the same time, when we look at the laws that govern this sector, how easy they are to understand, and whether they are enforced, then the picture becomes a little bit more murky. We know that nonprofits can actually register under up to 13 provincial and federal laws. And then there are also multiple government interfaces for nonprofits at the district level, at the provincial level, and at the federal level. And some provinces have tried to cut through some of these layers of oversight. But overall, we still find that 70% of the organizations that we surveyed for the Doing Good Index in Pakistan find the laws related to the social sector difficult to understand. And this is the second highest proportion in Asia. On average, across Asia, about 40% say that they find it difficult. In Pakistan, it's 70%. And when laws are difficult to understand, or when they are not consistently enforced, as the middle figure there shows, then that makes efficient functioning of this sector difficult. It makes compliance more difficult, and then it becomes a difficult, the cycle of lack of trust gets amplified. Laws are difficult to understand, they may not be enforced, they may not be followed, and trust dips even more. So this is a cycle that we think Pakistan can absolutely break by making these laws easier to understand and streamlining some of these processes. But the more important part of regulations is that helps build trust by helping inculcate more transparency and greater accountability in the social sector. So that's a good goal for regulations to have. But as Ruth likes to characterize regulations, they're like cholesterol. There's good cholesterol that helps build transparency, that keeps the flow of funding relatively efficient and easy. And then there's bad cholesterol, which are maybe well-intentioned policies, but that have a dampening effect on the social sector. And again, in Pakistan, we find a mix over here. So the government rightly believes that there should be greater transparency and accountability in the social sector. It also feels that the social sector has not had the level of scrutiny that they should. And there are external pressures also for this, with the FATF task force looking at money laundering and terrorism financing. These are issues in Pakistan. So, and in other Asian countries, but also in Pakistan. So there are reasons for putting these laws in place. But at the same time, what we hear from social sector organizations is that they are feeling that this increased oversight is making them carrying out their duties and their work harder. So there needs to be a balance between increased transparency and therefore increased oversight, but also the smooth functioning of the social sector, because at the end of the day, the beneficiaries that are relying on these social services to be delivered to them will count on efficient and quick and comprehensive social service delivery. So there needs to be a balance over here. We also see that INGOs in particular are facing additional hurdles, and I would look forward to perhaps more questions and actually thinking from fellow panelists on this and maybe what this means for Pakistan today. But it's not all doom and gloom. In fact, as I said earlier, it is a mixed picture. We find that more nonprofits in Pakistan believe that they are trusted by society than the Asian average. So at the community level, nonprofits do feel trusted by the communities that they are operating in. We also see in Pakistan, as Ruth said, it's one of only a couple of countries where the social sector has taken this mandate of transparency and accountability in its own hands. And the PCP is a great testament to that. So an organization like the PCP is trying to build greater transparency, and its role has been recognized to the extent that the tax authorities are relying on the PCP for certifying organizations that are then eligible for tax exemption. So that's a pretty big mandate that has been given to the PCP. The other country that we see a similar organization, a similar mandate in is the Philippines, although there the organization that is doing the certification is not relied on for tax exemption, only for tax deductible donations. And we're also seeing some informal, formal nonprofit coalitions emerge in Cambodia. But PCP is definitely on one end of the spectrum with the most kind of comprehensive and systematic transparency building in the social sector. So regulations, having regulations that build transparency are great, but they have to be balanced against the dampening effect that they can have on the social sector. And a final part of regulations is the control of the flow of funds. We know that even before COVID hit, in 10 out of the 18 economies that the Doing Good Index looks at, foreign funding was declining. It was declining because Asian countries are getting richer. Even in Pakistan, between 2001 and 2015, the poverty level has halved. So donors are looking at other countries outside of Asia or other countries in Asia that are more deserving, they think, of their funding. That's one reason. But the other reason that foreign funding was already declining before COVID is that some economies are putting increased scrutiny on foreign funding. And Pakistan is one of the 6 countries that is doing that. In fact, 4 of the 6 are South Asian countries. There's Pakistan, India, Nepal, and Bangladesh, with China and Vietnam making up the remaining 2. And what this is doing is it is creating a greater impetus for social sector organizations to look towards domestic donors. 81% of organizations who report declining foreign funding are turning to domestic donors. So what does that mean for Pakistan? Let's zoom into Pakistan a bit. And you see that in Pakistan, reliance on foreign funding actually tends to be greater than the Asian average. 60% of organizations in Pakistan are receiving foreign funding, and foreign funding accounts for up to a third of their budget on average. In both of these, the reliance on foreign funding is greater than in the rest of Asia. And at the same time, it is becoming, on one hand, foreign funding is declining. That's accelerated by COVID. On the other hand, these organizations also need to register with the EAD to receive foreign funding, and that process is also slowing down the receipt of foreign funding, not just the giving of it. So again, it would be great to hear from all of you what you think this means for the Pakistani social sector in the near future as well as the long term. So that covers the areas where Pakistan can help improve its regulations, make them clearer, more supportive, and more enabling, and therefore do even better on the Doing Good Index. Let's look at the second group of reasons, which are incentives for giving, and that mainly includes fiscal incentives. You just heard that more and more organizations are turning towards domestic donors. Domestic donors are individuals as well as corporates. And in Asia particularly, we believe that tax incentives for individual and corporate donations are very important, because tax incentives in Asia serve 2 purposes or have 2 effects. One is when there's a tax subsidy for giving, people will tend to give more. That's well documented and researched. But the other impact, and this is relatively unique to Asia, is the strong signaling effect of tax deductions. When the government signals support for the social sector by saying there is 100% tax subsidy for individuals and corporates to donate. Everyone takes notice. They listen. They care what the government is signaling about and telling them to do. So the governments are asking them to do. So the government signal has an amplifying effect on tax deductions. And we see in Pakistan that the 100% rate of tax deductions are in place, although the effect is somewhat dampened by placing limits on the income that is eligible for them. But we heard from our survey respondents that tax incentives really, really matter, but it's very difficult to claim these tax incentives in Pakistan. And this feeds back to, if you look on the left, the individual giving portion of social investment in Pakistan. We see that in Pakistan, 70% of nonprofits in 2018 told us that they receive individual donations. But in 2020, that has fallen to only 55%. Now, difficulty in claiming tax deductions is not the only reason, but making it easier to do that can help pull this number up. And it would be great to hear why you think this number has declined from 70% to 55%. I can cite our partner PCP's study from 2016, which found that, to no one's surprise, Pakistanis are a very charitable lot. 98% of households were giving donations, but most of them were giving donations to individuals and not to organizations. And that's what we see reflected in this 55%. 45% of organizations don't receive donations from individuals at all. And that speaks to incentives. It can also speak to the lack of trust that people feel about the social sector in general. The final area that I want to talk about where we see great potential for Pakistan to make strides in is greater collaboration between the government and the social sector and the corporate and the social sector. Pakistan is, let's talk about government and the social sector first. So government can engage more with the social sector through a number of ways. One of which is procurement. Procurement is the government contracting out social service delivery to social sector organizations. And again, there are two reasons why that is important in Asia. One, it helps build the capacity of social sector organizations and it helps them grow. But two, it legitimizes the social sector. It helps build trust. When people see the government working closely with the social sector to deliver social services, people will trust the social sector more as well. So there are a number of reasons why procurement is so important. And here Pakistan actually pulls ahead of a lot of peers in being one of only 3 economies with a dedicated public procurement agency. And it can go even further ahead by offering additional incentives to social sector organizations to participate, as say Vietnam does. We see that a quarter of nonprofits in Pakistan do receive procurement contracts, and they tend to be reflect the Asian average, both in this and in the proportion of the budget that makes up. Is there room for growth here? Absolutely, and the Public Procurement Agency might actually be able to facilitate that. The other way that the government can engage with the social sector is by direct grant giving. And here we find that the Pakistani government lags the rest of Asia. Only 19% of nonprofits receive government grants, and it makes up only 3% on average of a Pakistani organization's budget. The Asian average is 3 times that. So there is room for the government to increase support to the social sector. And finally, greater collaboration between corporations and the social sector. Why do we care about this? We care about this because the corporate sector can plug in direct resources and support the social sector. And we see here that in Pakistan, about 37% of organizations are receiving direct funding, which is great, but it does lag behind Asia's 48%. And we also see that on average, these corporate support to the average organization tends to be quite small. On average in Asia, an average Asian STO will get 3 times that amount from the corporate sector. So corporate funding is flowing to the social sector. And in fact, I think another PCP study said that it has increased manyfold over the last few years, but it still remains not as pervasive as it does in the rest of Asia. But there's another reason, another few ways in which the corporate sector can engage with the social sector and help build greater trust in the social sector. One is through greater engagement through volunteering. Another is by having people with corporate backgrounds sitting on nonprofit boards. And we think this is important because the social sector faces a talent gap and a skills gap. Some of that gap can be filled by people with corporate backgrounds. For example, in providing accounting services or legal advice or fundraising advice. So we think that this kind of engagement is healthy, both because it builds trust, but also because it allows this skills transfer and skills donation to the social sector. And finally, I just want to mention a couple of opportunities and rising trends in Pakistan before handing the mic back over to Ruth. One is that we are seeing a growing interest in the social sector. We know that there are very large, well-known, homegrown nonprofits that continue to make an impact, like the Aga Khan Rural Support Program, or the Orangi Pilot Project, or the ED Foundation. But even more encouragingly, we see that 80% of young people in Pakistan are saying that they are equally or more interested in the social sector than their parents. Also, interestingly, the talent gap in the social sector is huge. But in Pakistan, it doesn't seem to be as difficult to recruit skilled talent as in the rest of Asia, although organizations still struggle to retain them. And finally, the rise of social enterprises, which are organizations that are using business methods to meet a social or environmental need, can be a game changer for social service delivery in Pakistan. We did another study, which we published at the end of last year, in which Pakistan was one of 6 economies examined. And we found that in Pakistan, the top 3 areas that social enterprises are working in are education, information technology, and healthcare. That's the study. And again, it's available on our website. But we see other encouraging trends. We see that donors are showing more interest in social enterprises, that nonprofits are eager to see more social enterprises in the system because they think that the more actors there are trying to meet social needs, the quicker and better those social needs will be met. But we also see great female participation. Almost half of the founders are female, and we know that that is not reflected in the corporate sector. That kind of female leadership is quite outstanding in social enterprises. Another rising trend we see is that organizations are willing to leverage technology to raise funds and by crowdfunding. Although only about 20% are crowdfunding now, 50% of Pakistani nonprofits intend to crowdfund in the future. So with those trends, I leave you and hand it back to Ruth for wrapping up.
Thank you, Mevesh. So as we said, there's a role for everyone in fixing this problem. First, governments. Governments can put in place better regulations, the good cholesterol regulations that allow the sector to flow. They can think about taxes. And here I just want to make a note that in Asia, those people who give philanthropically, whether they do it as individuals or they do it through their companies, tend to give aligned with government. They tend to give to those very same issues like education and healthcare that Shazia mentioned, that government also wants to work on. So by giving tax breaks actually increases the amount of money that flows to the very same issues and problems that the government is interested in. And then as Mevesh said, governments can signal. Governments need to say very clearly, we trust the social sector, we see it as a valued partner with us to solve our problems, and we want to try to enable it. What can businesses do? Well, businesses can certainly provide funding, but they can also transfer skills that are really important for nonprofits to be more accountable and transparent and to be more effective and impactful with the money that they do receive. Businesses can engage in public-private partnerships with government and also in partnerships with nonprofits and social delivery organizations. But the social sector itself needs to do a better job. And herein, many in Pakistan with the leadership of PCP are doing a great job. They need to tell their stories. They need to put their annual report on their website. They need to have a website. They need to be able to build trust and to say, look, everything we are doing, we want you to hear about it. We have nothing to hide. We have good news to share with you, and we want you to trust us. When the nonprofit organizations and social enterprises do that, they attract more funding. So that is a very virtuous cycle. So with that, that's our call to action. And we really want to thank you, and we look forward to the discussion.
Okay, we're done. Thank you, Dr. Ruth and Mahvish. I think it was a very interesting presentation of the findings. And I just was listening, and I thought that you have brought forth many questions and issues that need attention from the government at the policy and program levels. And we discussed it also at different forums, the problems in the regulatory environment in Pakistan, not only in other Asian countries, but particularly in Pakistan, and also the problems involved in building collaborations and partnerships between the government and the social sector. And I think the role of social sector is pivotal in achieving the sustainable development goals, because 1 to 5 or even 8 sustainable SDGs, they are related to the social sector development and its growth and progress. So a very important and pertinent point, that how to divert and the capital flows or private foreign investment towards social sector development. I think with these few remarks, I would now go on to the next level, and where we start the panel discussion. And as I said in the beginning, we have 2 worthy panelists, distinguished ones. I would now request Dr. Atiya Inayatullah to just express her views and give her thoughts on what she has heard in the presentation, and also her other experience and knowledge about the subject. Okay, Dr. Atiya Inayatullah, you have 15 minutes and you can go.
Thank you very much, Nosheen. I'm afraid, but I'm going to make your job harder for me. You have to just stop me when my time
I know that.
over, for the simple reason that our speakers before us have given such a depth and world of knowledge and such important facts that I don't know where to begin and what to say. But I do want to tell Mahvish that her presentation on Pakistan was so rich, and somewhere in whatever my comments will be, I will refer to it, but we need a separate session with you on that, Mahvish. And I want to go to what Ruth has said. And I want to talk about Asia and her perception. It pleased me no end that post-COVID, we are not looking for new ways to do things. We are seeking how we are going to, what are the next stages, phases, and what are we going to do post-COVID. Before I delve into that, I want to very quickly, and you'll excuse me if I tend to be talking in shorthand. Being researchers, you'll understand what I mean, and we can go into the question and answer. But the Doing Good Index of 2020 is so good that it now leads on to the need for your doing many other things which flow from this. And I hope that, and I know that you do not believe it's a one-off, but certainly I feel that your donor contribution, every cent of it, your donors can be very proud of the product that you have given. And I'm sure that they are satisfied with the outcome, as we are, that Pakistan through PCP is one of your partners. Now, my crystal ball tells me that post-COVID, even though we are still in it, I would like to suggest that what I see is like 2 or 3 things. The first is that things like more government, and thriving globalization is under question. The second thing, a transition driven by technology will come into place. And my third observation would be that if the heyday of globalization is over, and it is equally clear that no country can live in isolation, as that is not an option for any country. So where do we go? And I go straight to Asia and to your study. And here I would like to suggest that with adversity, and there is enough of it, and we don't need to talk about that, but with adversity comes an opportunity. And I'm inviting you to an opportunity of regional togetherness. And I'm referring directly to your report, in which I find that the heart of the index is a roadmap on how Asian economies share prosperity and build a more sustainable future together. Is there anything for us Asians to be more concerned about when 1/3 of the world's wealth and 1/3 of the world's poverty is in Asia? So I very strongly give that as a focus in the coming years and time, because we don't know how to do it and we need to learn how to do it. And also another point which I would like to build in support of Look East mantra, if you can call it that, is that it is strengthened by the paradigm shift in the global political economy. I mean, let's be real, it is there, and we need to take that into account. Now, I'd like to go to what works on the ground. This is what Ruth said. It is important that we look at things on what is working in Asia. I also heard Mavish say that how can we generate domestic philanthropy money? It does not need to be the billionaires or the corporates of the world. But in the whole of Asia, we have got very strong communities. And our base is still the community, the grassroots. So what I'm suggesting is, and mind you, I would like to, and it's communities, and I'm going up to the middle class, because we talk of billionaires and millionaires when we are talking of philanthropy. We can make the fourth sector of development in Asia a community-based orientation, and through whom I would like to suggest we have to mobilize the mid-income, the global mid-income class of people, out of which I think I saw it in your own report that 88% are from Asia. In the next, by 2028, 88% of the middle class will be from Asia. And this, I think I got it from your report. This middle class has giving hardwired in their DNA. The middle class, they really have giving hardwired in their DNA. And I think that this is something which we are missing out on and we need to go towards. I'm sure everyone has seen the movie Work, Love, Pray, in which exactly this comes out, that philanthropy, the heart, and the spirit and soul need to be harnessed. We have many good practices. I'm not just talking philosophically or what I want to say, but very definitely there is a community out there, and we have got excellent good practices in Asia, which we need to exchange with each other and according to our own cultural norms build on. And this is the reason I would expect that that individual giving will get institutionalized. I think, yes, there will always be a place for individual giving, but the sooner and the faster, and we know where people want to give money at that level, in the community, on health, on education, on safe drinking water, sanitation, and these are all part, and I'll talk of the SDG in a moment. So there I leave you with the good practices. And mind you, I think this will be one of the key ways of building trust deficit, because of the accountability and the transparency. And each government in Asia today has got a democratic setup where the local government is positively the people of the country, and the trust deficit, if it is transparency and accountability, the stakeholders, they must own it, they must do it, and they must take it forward. And I feel very strongly that this is an area which we need to work on as philanthropists. I'll go very quickly before I see Nausheen looking at me hard on tax and fiscal policies. Yes, obviously, it's central to any discourse on philanthropy. But for me, particularly when I talk of a DNA wired with philanthropy, and all our studies, mind you, all our studies have shown this. It may be for whatever purpose, but it's there. The fiscal policy, but it has got the flip side to the coin. On one side, there is the altruism. And yes, on the other side, when it comes to the tax net, it is tax benefits. There's no doubt about it. But this has been alluded to by both Ruth and Manaz, that my take on tax breaks is the same, that yes, they are needed as incentives, but the other important messages that are to be sent through fiscal policy, they should not be overlooked. One, I'm talking of public perception of institutional recognition. See, when government recognizes, it makes a lot of difference. The second is the good governance of SDOs. And I thank you for making that ugly word, NPOs, not-for-profit NGOs, into SDOs. And I hope we all pick up that word fast and soon. And certainly, the good governance element comes out with these tax benefits. But the third, and the issue and point which needs to be pushed forward, because the examples you have given, and I know that the philanthropy centers are best developed in Asia, the certification regimen is a perfect setup for giving people confidence in donors. So the certification regimen, I would recommend to CAPS, that when we work together as a region, that the certification should be pushed forward. I go very quickly to the SDGs, because without that, I think that Asia will suffer a lot if we do not focus on that. And the PPP partnership over there, which has been talked about by Ruth, mentioned it. This is possibly one of our most important strategies. And here, I would like to make an offer to you. I believe that working with and filtering our philanthropy program into the SDGs 17 particularly, and all of them, is for me strategic philanthropy for Asia. I would put this very clearly into strategic philanthropy. And I give you the example of Pakistan's SAS program. It is a social safety net, very vast, very big, very well-run program. And I'm absolutely confident that Pakistan would be very happy to share it with other Asian countries as a good practice. And we need, and here I'm throwing the ball in your court, Ruth, we need a forum for sharing good practices in Asia, very, very clearly. Regulatory environment. Nausheen, don't look at me. I've got 2 minutes.
No, you have 5 more minutes to wrap up.
Okay, good, good. I come to regulatory environment. Yes, you have mentioned it. Manaz mentioned it. NGOs, to which I belong, activists, which I am, people like us, we are in the doghouse, plain and simple. Whatever it be, whether it's FATF or whatever it is, but the fact of the matter is that the going is not good. But I also want to tell you that civil society is not going away. The NGOs will remain. Governments may come and go. Whatever else may happen. But people's organizations are there to stay. So if that is the case, I strongly advocate the need for SDO sustainability. We are talking of sustainability through the SDG goals. For God's sake, these do-gooders need to be sustainable themselves. And here Mavish has given a very good example, and I think Ruth has given it, and it's also in your report, and I want this to be taken up seriously. The direction has been set. This is the next direction, not new, the next direction. It just needs regulatory approval. No, the regulations at present don't approve it, but they can approve it. And I am referring to the rise in non-profits with income streams from social enterprises, which contribute to their sustainability. And this needs, whether you do, I don't know how you can take this forward, but I think we should not go away from this session without an agenda for work which we would like to think of doing together. And finally, I come to another game changer. This is a game changer, but the last game changer I want to bring to you is regarding the no, there are two more actually. I can't leave youth out. So the last is, I just saw I made a note about youth. There is HNWIs. This is an important point, and it needs to be looked at. In this regional alliance, we have, by the grace of God, in fact, I was seeing, I think that many of your donors are from this HNWIs, the ones who have sponsored this.
All of them.
All of them. Great, great. Because we have been told that by 2023, 1/3 of the world's billionaires will be in Asia. Great news. That's really great news. And with this explosion of number of ultra-rich people, it is time, and it's time now, to have a consultation and a discourse for the Bill Gates and Warren Buffetts of Asia, some of whom, as you have said, all of them are your sponsors. You invite them.
Not all the wealthy people are our sponsors, but all of our sponsors are wealthy people.
Wealthy people.
Okay.
Thank you for correcting me.
Very good.
So I put on your work agenda a dialogue, a consultation. How do we mobilize them? As you have said, they are used to giving to global things and jetting around and enjoying skiing in Zurich, but also looking at polio and the vaccine. Let's ask them to look at the people of Asia. And finally, youth. We have to get to these millennials. And I also talk of Gen X, because we need to develop networks with the millennials, because they are pioneers of social networks. It's a very interesting phenomena. When I go to universities and meet younger people who are educated or getting educated, they are looking for change through social networks, which is very interesting. So we can create a network of opportunity. Oh, that's my dog. I don't know why he's barking, but please don't let him.
I think he's
bark.
agreeing with you.
Probably. So we need to, the youth want to meet with like-minded people. And what we need to do is that the millennials they want to be. So let's make them a part of something bigger than themselves. That's you. Make them bigger. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Atiya, for really giving us an excellent review of the questions and other issues that need to be really pushed forward and resolved. And you have really covered a large span and areas of intervention in such a short time. And I was thinking, oh, what is being missed? Then you are adding almost
I think
added
we
everything,
might
giving
also use
useful
some of
suggestions and giving
we
useful
might use some
suggestions
of
and advice to follow up.
we might use some of Dr. Atia's words for our marketing materials, if that's okay.
Totally.
Yeah,
So.
great. That's why we admire her so much and we are her friends. Anyways, now I think our next speaker, panelist is Mr. Farhan Bukhari. I have already introduced him to the group, to the session. So please, Mr. Bukhari, you are requested now to take your 15 minutes and express your views.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And I'm glad I still have 15 minutes.
Well, if you can wrap it up in 10, I'll be happy.
Okay, I'll try. As Dr. Atia and Ayatullah said, we are in the doghouse, and that's the story.
Literally, we're in the doghouse.
We are in the doghouse in Pakistan, and before I try to give a brief rundown on why we are in the doghouse, I'd just like to commend you for the study. It's among the few documents that I've received in recent times, which I'm sure will remain on my desk for reference purposes, at least for some time to come, because it compiles together some very fresh and valuable information otherwise scattered around, and really gives us an update at a very critical time in the history of our planet. So thank you very much for this effort. It's a very timely document. A couple of points, and since Dr. Atia Nazullah has already covered aspects of Asia, let me focus more on Pakistan. Looking through this document, I was left wondering that on the one hand, you have this document with valuable information, but on the other hand, there are stakeholders, practitioners, which is non-profits, regulators in government, and then last but not the least, the community of donors. And I think it was Dr. Shapiro who, or maybe Madam Mumtaz, who talked about the need to bring in new talent to nonprofits from the business community or people with business acumen. Well, the story, unfortunately, is that just instantly I can think of at least half a dozen big corporate names in Pakistan who've got CSRs, in-house CSR units that they don't really treat seriously. Those CSR units are not really at the center of their radar screens. There have been times that I've asked CEOs exactly what do they gain out of these CSRs, and a number of times the reply has been, oh well, everyone else is doing it, so why not us? Or that this is something which makes us look good. At least one individual also said that this is exactly the kind of thing which opens doors in higher echelons of government, because we do have a CSR, and therefore we have a vehicle to invest in, quote unquote, the social sector, but those activities are not really central to their thinking. So the thinking is more along the lines of the corporate world, whereas the CSRs and CSR-related responsibilities are on the sideline. The challenge for Pakistan has also grown tremendously in this area, with the regulatory environment being tightened. And there's nothing wrong with tightening up to a point or in some areas, but tightened for the wrong reasons and in the wrong way, especially the last decade. The history, unfortunately, goes back to 2011, the case of an individual who was accused of working for a foreign intelligence agency, and since then the tightening has continued. No one really in official circles has tried to understand the cost of this tightening in terms of curtailing activities of non-profits and how that affects the social sector. Budgets are going to remain tight for the social sector, at least in Pakistan, for the foreseeable future. That's the way the overall economic fiscal picture is looking like right now. So in an ideal situation, non-profits ought to have a bigger role. Now the question is, how do you make it happen? How do you translate the findings of this study to the benefit of promoting non-profits in a way that regulators also get the message and try to become facilitators while also fulfilling their regulatory responsibilities? Non-profits understand, and this is also a very big problem, that there are many people involved in philanthropy who still do not appreciate the need to gear up to the times that we live in. This morning, I was telling somebody that I'm still shocked occasionally when I come across examples of people in this area who typically maintain two books. One book where they give out money and receive money from people who don't want to be held accountable for the donation because that money has not been declared for tax purposes. And then the donations go to areas which are not necessarily entirely legit or documented or both. So reconciling these three elements, I think is really the challenge ahead. You've come up with this valuable document. It's a good document, has some very valuable findings, but the question now is translating these findings into reality so that ultimately you create the kind of impetus which is necessary to, for want of a better word, to make it happen. To improve opportunities for nonprofits, to improve the understanding of regulators, and to also encourage a greater degree of seriousness by corporates and donors. And this is not to give a sweeping statement. There are some, including some great supporters of PCP, who are very committed to their charitable work, but this doesn't really apply across the board. So I think going forward, if you can somehow or the other reconcile these three elements, then I think this study can really become of a landmark significance. It's a great start. It's a very good start, but I think there's work which still remains to happen. PCP continues to pass out the message across Pakistan, but there's a long road ahead. And thank you very much for putting this together.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay, thank you, Hansa, for managing your time so well, and also I think diverting our attention to the ground realities in Pakistan, that the findings of how we can benefit from the findings of this study and translate them into actionable items. And I think we have issues and gaps in finding the connectivity between all stakeholders, which needs to be, I think, explored and worked on further. I think with these views and excellent presentations, I think, do we have time for question and answer? Because 3:30, and what is the suggestion of the group? Because Arsalan,
I would just like to respond very quickly to both of these comments. Can I do that?
Okay, yeah, if you are interested.
And
sure.
Can we also have Shazia's question? Can we also have Shazia's question? No, she is
Shazia online.
Ji, sure, ma'am.
Okay, can we have Shazia?
Well, ji, ma'am. Listening, first of all, I think very interesting presentation. I had gone through the report, but the but the succinct way in which data has been brought out for Pakistan really made me reflect on a lot of things. But there was one comment from Ruth that I really found very compelling and interesting. And Ruth, you said that Pakistan is, and PCP, its certification is on one end of the spectrum, and that it's really well structured, and the way it is being, the indicators and all, and the way it is back to the tax incentives also. My question was that, do you feel that PCP, with its a very successful model of building trust into not-for-profits, do you think there are other economies within Asia which would benefit from our experience? And if they are, then we would be very happy to assist them in building a similar certification model, and also to see what challenges do they face. So it could be a two-way learning process, but we would be happy to share how and in what ways has certification matured and taken the current shape in Pakistan.
Well, I'll tell you, Shazia, I just had a conversation 2 days ago with a potential partner who we are hoping to work with on the DGI. And I was telling her about PCP, and she said, really, in Pakistan, I want to learn more. And I said, join our network of partners, and we'll ask PCP to give a presentation at our next conference. So you're on, Shazia.
That sounds great. Thank you.
There will be a lot of interest in that, because a number of organizations are realizing the need to, in effect, self-regulate, become more accountable and transparent, and the appetite is there, the readiness is there. To Dr. Farhan's point, I just want to say I'm glad there's still work to do, because as much as I really don't want to retire quite yet, so I'm glad there's still some opportunity to work with you and to move this whole agenda forward. So I look forward to it. I think that we are an Asia-based organization. We are not, our job is not to criticize government, but to provide resources and ideas to government. And really, we want to work with our partners to do that. And we think that we have very specific tools and strategies to take forward. And then to the many points that Dr. Atiyah made, I want to say that I think that's the Asian century was used, and it hasn't really materialized yet. But this is our time. This is it, right? Because when you think about what's happened in COVID-19, it's about the community. It's about working together. It's about harmony. It's about people, community, planet. These are ancient values that are embedded in every philosophy throughout this region. This is not a transaction-related part of the world. This is a part of the world where relationships, where community, where harmony with government, with the private sector, with the public, with communities is part of the system. We need to build on that. And so we look to ways in which to build on that. And I'll just tell you that Mevish is working on a really important study about how to effectively partner with government that we would love to present again when we're finished with that. And just to your point also, Mr. Farhan, I think that CSR time has come also. Now, by hook or by crook, companies are under pressure from society, from governments, and in some cases because they want to step up. And it's going to be increasingly hard for companies not to operate profit with purpose. I think that's going to become more embedded in the companies that are left standing after COVID-19. I don't know, you know that your neighbor, India, has legislated a 2% CSR requirement. And actually, the companies have embraced it, the top 18,000 that are required. And it is moving into the overall strategy of the companies in very discernible ways. So whether it's regulated like India or, thank you for your note. And Ruth means compassion. He just said Farhan means joy. Ruth means compassion. I can never be ruthless. But anyway, so I think that the tide is turning, and I think we need to pull on the strengths and the values that make this part of the world really strong and powerful, and bring them to the fore.
So Ruth, you also knew who to reference, which neighbor to reference to get the Pakistanis excited.
Yeah, I did think that might work. So those are my comments in response. I think our time is now.
Okay,
I think Nosheen just got a call that we should wrap up.
Yeah, I think now I'm looking at the watch, but if there is no other question, that maybe we can request Ms. Shazia Amjad to wrap up and give her closing remarks. Arsalan, is there any other question from the audience participants? He's no more there. Okay.
No,
any
he's there.
From
Arsalan is very much there, but I don't think there were any questions. I was looking at comment side.
Can I make one suggestion? May I request that our final note is that we make a roadmap, or we decide where do we go from here on the basis of the 2020 report. What would we like, how would we like to see this go forward? And it's not necessary that CAPS alone does it, but we can all think that if this is it, and we can add, subtract, and if we can make a working document for Asia, and then bits and pieces can be given to others for implementing, or there may be some country that is interested in a research aspect of it. If we can just get a working paper made on the basis of your 3 studies which you have, or studies that you are proposing to undertake further. Is this an important enough report for us to think in these ways? Because Farhan's opening remarks about the value and the worth of this Good Index report moved me to saying so many webinars now and so many meetings, you know, people say, oh yes, if you don't want to do anything further, just go to the meeting and come back and that's it, it'll all be folded up. But after hearing Farhan's comments, and he's a very astute journalist, that means that there is enough and in it for everyone to bite and buy in. But we need an overview of what could the agenda be. You can think about it. I don't want to.
Thank you. Well, I think, you know, we do end our presentation with a call to action, and you are too. So we say that we do action research, because we want to create some action, and we want to improve systems, and we want to bring about a better future for all of us. So absolutely, we look forward to working together to make that into a reality.
I think the discussion has really ended on a very positive note, and I hope we are able to carry it forward and further, as Dr. Athiya has also suggested. So maybe now is the time. I think we have really managed the time well, and now is the time to request Ms. Shazia Amjad to give her closing remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Nosheen. I think this was an extremely stimulating discussion, first of all. And I would just like to end it on a very positive note, which is that, you know, we have always heard South-South cooperation. And I think the report really says that Asia for Asia. And Asia talks about Asian philanthropy. I think this is something, and as Dr. Tia also said, the future holds the billionaires in Asia. I think this is a very important and a turning moment for philanthropy in the region, where I think we need to look at the Asian ground realities and learn from each other and support Asia for Asia in taking the philanthropy agenda forward. Pakistan and PCP are very happy and willing to not only learn from the work that has been undertaken in the 18 economies, but would also welcome any opportunities to help and support or participate in research or take forward the certification model and its replication in the economies within Asia with a very bright heart, I must say. So thank you so much, and we look forward to another participation in Asia. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Mavish. Let me also thank my respected board members for taking out time to be here with us and contribute to the discussion on philanthropy and civil society in Asia. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
So I think in the end, I would also like to thank all the, the participants which made this, generated an illuminating discussion. And we hope that we can carry it forward. Thank you. And
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Inshallah.
Thank you.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hafiz.
Bye.